What is good, Ambush? And welcome to this week's episode of the Desert Tiger Podcast, here with me, Colton G. And this week on the show, we are joined by Synth Pop new wave artist Vanden Dool, as we talk about his new EP, The View From Here. Yes, Vanden Dool is a new wave synth pop artist hailing out of Lethbridge, Alberta, and like I just told you, he has recently released his second EP, The View From Here, and it gives us a little bit of a look, an insight into, growing up in a small town such as Lethbridge, sort of the happenings, the going-ons of that life. And of course, that's where Vanden Dool also grew up, where he got his experience. We're going to talk to him all about that, growing up inside of the school band music scene, playing clarinet, how going to university in Lethbridge gave him the opportunity. It gave him the tools to create and finally release his own music. We're also going to talk about Ty's time as a DJ at the community radio station that is ran through the University of Lethbridge. We're also going to take some time to touch on a few other things, like Ty's growth through his SoundCloud years. We're also going to talk about his love of Halloween, because Ty likes to release a yearly Halloween EP. And we're going to get the details about how this year's rendition of that is coming along. All of this and more in today's episode of Desert Tiger. And all of it is brought to you by DesertTigerMerch.com. I love DTP.com, because that's where you go to cop yourself some merchandise from the show. You rep it everywhere you go. One of your friends, your family, and even your enemies. Yes, DesertTigerMerch.com. Now, with that being said, you guys know what time it is. It's about time that we spun one of Vanden Dool's tracks off of this new EP. That, of course, being The View From Here. And I mean, an EP based about life inside of a small town city. Why don't we go and kick off with a song about exactly that? This is Small Town City.
Half of the year, finding a new job is impossible here in this small town city. Small town city. The crime that would make you think we're falling apart. The big city kids are breaking local kids' hearts in this small town city. Small town city. Some days I'd like to run away, some days I'd hate to leave. Some days I'd like to run away, some days I'd hate to leave. West of the Hills, students are struggling to learn to be the next scientists and artists to turn out of the small town city. Small town city. Us here think climate change is a farce. The big city kids still breaking local kids' hearts in the small town city. Small town city. Some days I'd like to run away.
The Desert Tiger Podcast.
All right, so are you ready to jump on into it?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right, let's talk about the Vanden Dool.
All right.
So, I see we're going to start at the beginning, of course. So I see your music began through the school programs, playing clarinet, that sort of thing. So the music you're releasing now, of course, definitely a little bit of a different vibe from that style, from that world, of course, even from the type of music you would generally find inside of a place like Lethbridge, Alberta. So let's take from the beginning into how this sort of new wave inspiration found its way into you from the clarinet start that you had.
I actually don't think they're related in any way at all. I think there's similar parts of classical and popular music that I tend to gravitate towards in both fields, like emotional quality and kind of more of almost a passionate feel to it. So that's something you'll find in a lot of good classical music, especially in the Romantic period. And that's also something that you'd find a lot of in synth pop and other like electronic or new wave or post-punk genres like that.
Okay. So at what point did you begin to craft your own music? Was this something that you had done once you had gone to college? Were you already doing this when you were in high school? At what point were you making your own music behind the scenes?
I wanted to do it since I was in middle school. I didn't get the chance to do so until I started going to university, because then I had access to recording studios, and I also had some people I knew from class that could just come in and record stuff in a session for me. So I think the first thing that I recorded was a school project in my first semester back in 2013. So I would have been 18 at the time.
It was the opportunity that the University of Lethbridge had presented to you from just a equipment and everything else standpoint, which is very understandable.
Yeah, essentially. I didn't really have any of my own equipment at that point, and I didn't really know how to use any kind of software or anything, and I didn't really have the budget for it either, so that was kind of the first chance I had to be able to get in charge of that kind of thing without having to find somebody who had the time for it.
Okay, so are you learning to produce at the same time as you're doing your own music? Like you're just sort of applying it as you continue to go?
Essentially, yeah. So like every university degree, it takes 4+ years to complete the one that I took. So you would continuously be learning things in class that would either be in studio or out of studio. It could be about writing the music or composing it. It could be about recording it. It could be about post-production. So it was like an acceleration of the learning curve that you would normally have with doing it just as a hobby, because now you have the educational aspect of it as well, just the formal setting of it.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, if you have any questions, if maybe you're going ahead of what you've already been taught and you need to know something, you have the people there that have those sorts of answers to the questions that you were probably had.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so just that setting, being around people who knew what they were doing and other people who were also learning their craft definitely helped you grow. So at what point do you begin volunteering at the campus radio station in Lethbridge, and how do you feel that helped you with your growth in your learning process?
So the first time I found out about the station was when they had in the first week of my first semester, I think. There was a day where they had a bunch of booths out for all the groups and the volunteer stuff that was happening at the university, and one of them was the radio station CKXU. So I approached them because I figured that might help with some sort of career path at some point, even outside of being an artist, even being like involved in radio in the future, like in commercial radio in some way. And I didn't do a whole lot with them. I volunteered for a couple of events, and that was about it. I didn't really get heavily involved in them until about my third year, which would have been 2016 or 2015, I think, when I decided to start up a radio show about the local music scene, basically. So that kind of helped me figure out what else was going on in the city, or what else had already come and gone, and it kind of helped me follow what was on the horizons a little bit, just because of not only the station library, but the research I put into the show. And then after that, I added a second show, which was more about the music that I kind of gravitate towards. And that one kind of introduced me to a lot of new artists. And I even made like a list of them of like the Canadian artists, just so I could set it aside in case I needed to look for someone as an opening act for like a touring show or anything like that. So it kind of acted as a door opening in the same way that university, my studies acted as a door opening for the production process for my own music.
So it presented another opportunity to connect and network, whereas the university was probably more of a local level. This allowed you to spread a lot further.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, I like it. So, of course, the name of the first show that you ran there ends up coming up back later, and we're going to get to that. But, of course, during this time, too, you're also releasing a lot of your tracks on Spotify and hyping things up, doing compilation albums, everything else. So take us through those first few years as a musician, the formative years before you got to the point of, let's say, pulling up the bootstraps and getting a little more serious with the Vanden Dool name like you did in 2019.
So the first time I put anything online was in the second semester of my first year in 2014. I put out a single song that I recorded with some friends, and I put that up like just on a Facebook video, and then after that I put it on like YouTube and SoundCloud, just anything that I could just put on for free basically. And I started recording other stuff just at home with a USB mic and some virtual instrument plugins, which is essentially the way I still do it today. And I would kind of put those up as they came along. Most of them were originals, but a lot of them were covers as well. So the covers I would just put on YouTube and SoundCloud, and then the originals I would put on Bandcamp. And then after a year had gone by, I would compile the originals into like a compilation album with year and then whatever year of recording that was. So the first one would be the year one, which would be 2015, year two in 2016. I got up to year four, and once that happened, I wanted to kind of start over and have something that was a little less confusing and also something that was properly mastered and everything. So I started preparing the first album, the self-titled album, and I did that by taking some of my more recent songs and getting them professionally mastered. Most of them were recorded on a proper microphone, so I didn't have to replace the vocals, but on a few of them I did. So in January 2019, I cleared absolutely everything of my discography, and I replaced it with the first single off of the self-titled, which was Hopeless Romances, and I released a couple other songs off of the album as singles in the following months, and then I released the album itself late in March of 2019, and that's basically how the discography as it stands now began. Sometimes I'll also have limited release EPs just for the Halloween season, which is kind of another thing that was layover from when I would just distribute stuff and not really have a plan to it. Before I would just leave it online, but now it lasts for like half the month and then I get rid of it because I wanna make it clear which releases I consider to be like the official ones, the essential ones that kind of embody what I want people to associate with me.
Okay, fair enough. So with that first self-titled EP, was this a lot of a collection of the songs that you had crafted through those first 4 years and just sort of picking the ones that you felt were just the best representation of yourself, or were some of these new songs, or how did that sort of get brought together?
Yeah, it was basically the stuff that I felt turned out the best out of those 4 years, which ended up being just like songs off of year three and year four that were just kind of tweaked so that it would sound a little better. And yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So then going into 2020 here, we bring back, well, once again, the name, The View From Here. It is the second EP. It is the newest release from Vanden Dool. So going from a collection of songs that were sort of built over the years into this new EP. So how do you feel that you have grown not only as an artist but also as a human being from between Vanden Dool, the self-titled, to The View From Here?
Well, the View From Here's music was kind of more themed because I wanted to make an EP with that title, and I wanted it to have the theme of just life in Lethbridge generally, and that kind of took me in a very specific direction, whereas the self-titled was just stuff that I wrote as I went along, and it was mostly stuff about my personal life, which also kind of started a little bit of drama when approaching its release. And this one is less. This one's less so a reflection of my personal life. It's just more of a general what's it like living here? How does it feel? And that is also kind of a reflection of me trying to reevaluate what I should be writing about, like how it's going to affect the people around me and the people that the song is referring to, especially if it is referencing anyone. So it kind of was a departure from the more gloomy and self-deprecating mindset that went into a lot of the songs in the first album.
On your heart after all the disappointments and losses from the life you had. Man on the sidewalk, begging for coins like you beg for peace from the stress of life before it drives you mad. Rust on the train bridge, building up like the pain of a love that you never had, but you lost anyway.
The Desert Tiger Podcast.
So speaking about life in Lethbridge. I'm very much interested to know, because coming from a small town and once again living in sort of a smaller town, once again, sometimes live shows can be very interesting, especially with some of the bills you can end up on, some of the packages and bands that you end up playing with. So, what is a Vanden Dool live show like? And what is some of the more interesting shows that you've maybe been billed as a part of?
So the live setup is actually quite simple for me. Most of the sounds that you hear are off of a backing track that I just have playing on my laptop, and then to give some sort of integrity to it, I'll also play something either on my keyboard or on an acoustic guitar, and I'll also have loops running through an Novation circuit, mostly drum loops, but sometimes there will also be like arpeggiators and bass lines running through it as well. So I wanted to give it a little more of a challenge, as well as giving it more of a live aspect, just so it didn't feel as much like I was cheating. I wanted to bring in like a 5-piece synth band, so fourth synth, 3 synths slash one of them doubling on bass guitar, and a drummer, and then me on vocals and occasionally guitar. And that didn't happen because the pandemic hit before we could have our first practice in. So that was supposed to be for the EP release, and now that obviously has to be put on hold. And some of the more interesting bills I've been on a couple of fundraising things. One of them was for a venue that was about to close, so that would probably have been the biggest lineup I was on, because it went from, I think, like 7 or 8 o'clock to maybe 2 o'clock, and it was 2 nights. I was on the second night, I think. No, I think it was the first night, and I kind of opened up the whole thing. So that was a bit of a fun thing to do. I've also played with a couple of other local electronic bands. One of them was Open Channels, who opened for my album release, and the other one was a band called Stars from Streetlights, which was a band that formed well before I did. They both formed before I did, so I wasn't the first to do this kind of thing in the city, but I do perform more regularly than they do. At least I did while shows were still safe to do so.
It's of course only so much you can do in this sort of situation where venues aren't an option and so many other things aren't an option, including possibly even Facebook. So it's an interesting world to operate, especially from an operating standpoint and trying to stay connected with an audience.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of equipment to do live streaming, so I kind of had to lay low since my last show. So I'm really looking forward to when we'll be able to do that with no problems and no issues, and can just play in a venue without it having to be like on a patio or behind glass or anything like that.
I agree, where you'll actually be able to, shake a fan's hand and maybe even give them a hug and say hello and get to know the people who are coming out and enjoying the evening.
Yeah, basically, and then also being able to have just a merch table out and having people be able to just look at the stuff and maybe buy it if they want. That's something that's also been kind of weird to navigate is that now all your sales are online, and then you either have to mail them out or go to their door and give it to them or leave it in their mailbox. So that's been a little troublesome, I think, because I personally like to buy merch like at the show, so I haven't really done a lot of online shopping for band merch, at least not for smaller scale local bands. So I feel like a lot of people have a similar mindset to that. So I think it'll definitely help when live shows become a normal thing again.
I 100% agree, because I feel it's just people want the opportunity to connect not only with their community but also with the musicians who are helping to bring them art, helping them to release their emotions, the things that they go through throughout the day, and I mean the things that we also put into our music.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's also just the feel of just getting it in person, because it feels more like you're doing some sort of duty, whereas when you're doing it online, it feels entirely like it's voluntary. While if you're at a booth table, it's like, okay, something's there. You should probably buy something and show your support.
Absolutely, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about support from another form. So as someone who has worked inside of the community radio sort of scene, who's probably had to deal and look at the earshot charts and that sort of fun, what has it been like to see your own name, your own music being represented on such charts and getting plays in places like, well, the place I live, Kamloops?
It's very interesting. When I first saw that the self-titled was just constantly on the Kamloops charts, I was like just surprised at it. That happened with the Year 4 compilation initially, and that was kind of what motivated me to make sure that when I released the self-titled, that one of my tour shows would be in Kamloops, because I thought that meant that it would have a pretty good size audience as far as out-of-town shows went, which didn't actually happen, but I definitely would consider going there again. I would just change the venue and also try to see if I could find a more local artist rather than someone who just kind of lives in a small town nearby. And the other charts that I've seen myself in the most regularly were the big city ones in Alberta. So Calgary and Edmonton would occasionally have one of my releases on their charts. There were a couple weeks of the self-titled on CJSW's charts and on CJSR's electronic charts. There was also an AM station in Toronto that played the self-titled quite a few times. I had a few plays on Calgary and Edmonton again with this EP, which was kind of nice to see. And it's also kind of interesting to see that those cities are playing my music more often than my own hometown is.
Yeah, sometimes that can definitely be the case. And then when you finally do break out of your hometown, everybody's, oh, he came from here. He came from here.
Yeah.
It's always a funny thing for sure. So earlier you mentioned your love of the Halloween season and releasing music based around the season, inspired by the season. So is there any plans for any more upcoming Halloween EPs or Halloween themed music to help set the spooky mood?
Yeah, at the time of this recording, I just finished one track for the one that's coming up this year. as always, I'm going to be releasing it after the first day after Thanksgiving, and I'm going to have it, just like last year, I'm going to have it available until November 1st. So if anyone wants to hear some of the darker side of my music taken to an extreme, they should look out for that.
Very limited time.
Yeah, it's also one of the more difficult things to come up with because it's kind of something I decided to do as an annual thing, and it sort of became an obligation rather than, oh, I have an idea, let's make this. So sometimes there's a bit of a creative block with it, and then I have to kind of work my way around that.
That's fair, that's fair. Sometimes, I'm sure at the beginning when it was coming a little more naturally and flowing, it was a good idea, but some years you find yourself maybe it gets close to the season and you don't even realize, oh, I need to start this.
Yeah, I just started working on the first track in the first week of September or the second week of September, so I kind of have to rush out the rest of it before like October 15th or so. So it's a little bit limiting in that way as well because I don't give myself enough time to experiment as much as I might want to. But this is also like the limited stuff that I don't have available for very long, so I also don't put very much importance on it compared to like the self-titled album or the View From Here EP or what else I have planned in the future on the horizon.
Okay, so it's more just a celebration of the season with the fans and just going through the motion of just loving Halloween as opposed to actually trying to make something of it.
Essentially, yeah, it's a way to kind of not really worry about whether I'm making the music accessible enough. I just want to make something that is just dark and disturbing, and a lot of times that also gets a lot of reception as well because some people just appreciate that kind of rawness to it, that kind of attempt to escape just those pop sensibilities and just make something that has basically no consequence if people feel like it's inaccessible or anything like that.
Okay, awesome. So, of course, it's been a fantastic journey going through the sand with you here today, going through your paces, and I have one last question, and we are actually getting into that spooky season, so I just want to know, what are some of your favorite Halloween songs, some of your favorite Halloween movies that maybe help get you into the groove?
Well, a lot of the music I listen to that I kind of associate with the season, it's not specifically Halloween related. It's just very, very dark electronic music that I think happens to fit with it because it has that kind of witchy feel to it, I guess. And so that would be like a lot of witch house music and a lot of music related to witch house. So like Black Ceiling would be one of them, as well as a band called Crimes, which is spelt with a 3 instead of an E. Also artists like Salem and basically anything in that kind of vein is what I would gravitate to and what I kind of try to emulate with the Halloween music. And as far as movies go, it's probably movies like The Shining, or just basically any kind of classic horror genre kind of, and with a little bit of an artsy touch to it. So some sort of like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds or things like that, basically. Just anything with a real sense of dread and atmosphere to it.
Mm-hmm. Something with a really solid vibe. Alfred Hitchcock was always like really good at making you try and look for things that might not even be there, and just like the anticipation he could build.
Yeah, that's what I really like about The Birds is just the way it ends with just the field full of birds just sitting there. Like that was one of my favorite moments in horror movie history that I've seen, because there's just something so suspenseful about just seeing that and not knowing if the characters are actually gonna make it out of there.
Absolutely. It is a fantastic movie, and it continues to stand the test of time for sure. All right, Tyler Vanden Dool, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today on the Desert Tiger podcast to tell us all about the new EP, The View from Here, as well as your journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, it was my absolute pleasure to be joined by Vanden Dool here today on the DTP, and I hope that you, the ambush, feels the same way. I hope you enjoyed the songs that you heard here today, of course those being Small Town City, which we kicked off today's episode with, and in the middle of the show we also played Rust on the Train Bridge. You can find both of those tracks as well as the rest of Vanden Dool's new EP, The View from Here, on, yes, your favorite music streaming service. And I also highly suggest you follow Vanden Dool on social media if you're into Halloween, so that you can find out exactly when that limited time release Halloween EP for 2020 is available. Just like Halloween, it only comes once a year, so you best get your hands on it while you can. With that being said, I need to give one final roaring DTP thank you to Vanden Dool for joining us here today. He actually also reached out to me himself through my email at desert.tiger.podcast@gmail.com, and we set that up, right? It doesn't always have to be through a PR agent. It doesn't always have to be that way. We as artists are capable of connecting and communicating ourselves, and when we do, we can make beautiful things happen, just like this episode. Just like next week's episode, which is brought to you by a PR agent, but that doesn't matter because it's fantastic as well. It's actually this Friday's episode, and it features guitar virtuoso Ariel Posen, as we're going to be talking about a new track that he is dropping this Friday, September the 18th, 2020, and I can't wait for you, the ambush, to join me there. And I need to thank you guys for tuning into this episode, for being loyal and dedicated as you are. If you're new, joining the ambush is easy as subscribing on your favorite podcast listening service, maybe the one you're using now. You can also help us grow by giving us a 5-star review, sharing this episode, and also heading on over to deserttigermerch.com and copying yourself something to support the show. Alright, you guys, we've already said our thank yous. We've already told you who's coming up this Friday. I think the only thing left to do is to tell you to put your paws in the sand and journey across your desert to find your mountaintop, your desert oasis, whatever it is that makes your heart sing its loudest and its proudest and makes you feel like the greatest rendition of the human being, the spiritual being that you are. Get out there, chase your dreams, even if they aren't that big. And that's okay, because whatever it is that makes you happy, it makes you happy, and that's what matters. And until next week, bye-bye, and stay beautiful. Because you are. Yes, you are.